This was the last time these two 10-year-old girls were seen before they disappeared. On August 4th, 2002, Holly Wells and her best friend Jessica Chapman left a barbecue at Holly's house unnoticed. Their disappearance sparked one of the biggest manhunts and garnered international interest. However, their story ended in tragedy and led to a suspect hiding in plain sight. But what exactly happened to little Holly and Jessica? Was their disappearance intentional or a random act? Hello and welcome back to M7 Crime Storytime. Today we look at the twisted case of the Soham murders. Soham is a small market town in Cambridgeshire County, England. It's a charming locality nestled among sprawling farmlands and parks. The town is ideal for raising a family and is known for its quaint Old English architecture. In 1944, the town narrowly escaped disaster during the Second World War when a fire broke out on one of the ammunition trains. Interestingly, though, many archaeological findings from the Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age were discovered in Soham and are now housed in the British Museum. Soham, however, has in recent years found itself overshadowed by a tragic event: the murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Holly and Jessica were both born and raised in Soham, Cambridgeshire. Both girls met when they were 4 years old and developed an instant bond. They both attended St. Andrew's Primary School and were also classmates. Those who knew them said they were inseparable and were more like sisters. Holly Marie Wells was born on October 4th, 1991, to parents Nicola and Kevin. She had a younger brother named Oliver. Friends and family described her as having a lovely nature. Jessica Amy Chapman was born to parents Leslie and Sharon on September 1st, 1991. She had two older sisters named Rebecca and Allison. Jessica was described as being a bit of a tomboy and enjoyed the outdoors. Jessica was a sporty child who took part in many physical activities. Her parents described her as being lively and well-behaved. She was an avid fan of English football. This was something the girls had in common, as they were both fans of the football club Manchester United, particularly the club's star player David Beckham. Both girls were considered to be responsible and dependable. At around midday of Sunday, August 4th, 2002, Jessica Chapman left her house to visit her friend Holly. Holly's parents were hosting a family barbecue, and Jessica had been invited. Both girls were eager to spend time together, as Jessica had just returned from holiday to Menorca in Spain. When Jessica reached Holly's house, she noticed another friend, Natalie Carr, had also been invited over. Natalie left before the barbecue could end, and both Jessica and Holly decided to change their clothes. They matched their attire with replica Manchester United t-shirts and black shorts. They then went downstairs to join the rest of the family outside for the barbecue. Just before dinner at around 5 p.m., Holly's mother wanted to take a picture of the girls in their matching outfits. They then sat down to eat with the other guests before returning to play games in Holly's room. Both girls were growing bored and decided to take a walk to a nearby vending machine at the local sports center to buy some sweets. They left home just after 6:15 p.m. without informing anyone about where they were going. At around 8 p.m., Nicola Wells, Holly's mother, went to call the girls downstairs to wish the guests goodbye. When she couldn't find them, she searched the entire house. Soon she was panicking and told her husband Kevin that the girls were missing. Kevin and Nicola, with the help of their guests, searched the surrounding streets and alleyways, but didn't find any trace of the girls. Nicola waited, knowing that both Holly and Jessica were responsible. Their curfew was 8:30 p.m., and she believed they'd return. The curfew time came and went, but there was still no sign of either girl. Nicola called Jessica's mother Sharon at around 8:45 p.m., hoping the girls had decided to go over to the Chapman's house. But that glimmer of hope was dashed. Neither Sharon nor her husband Leslie had seen either of the girls. Sharon and Leslie decided they too would go out and search the surrounding area for the girls. Both families spent the next hour calling out their names and knocking on the doors of neighbors. There was just no sign of either Holly or Jessica. It was then they decided to call the police and report the girls missing at 10 p.m. that evening. Police launched an immediate and intensive search for both girls. Several search teams were organized to look for any clues of the girls. Police teams also visited the friends of both Holly and Jessica, hoping to discover any information about their whereabouts. No one had seen them, and none of their friends could provide police with possible places the girls could have gone to without telling their parents. As news spread throughout the town, many residents came forward to help with the search. Police and volunteers made their way to the Soham Village College, hoping the girls were just hiding on the high school's grounds. School caretaker Ian Huntley noticed the police and a large group of residents heading toward the school grounds. He then came out and asked the group what was happening. He then discovered that the police were looking for the two girls named Holly and Jessica. Ian then told police he had seen both the girls that same evening. Ian unlocked the school gates to allow search teams in while a few police officers stopped to question him. He explained that he'd been washing his dog in the front yard when both Holly and Jessica had stopped by to talk to Maxine, his fiancée. Maxine was a teaching assistant at St. Andrew's Primary School, and both Holly and Jessica were very fond of her. Ian told both Holly and Jessica that Maxine had been unwell and was in the shower. They inquired about Maxine's recent job application and asked him if she'd gotten the permanent position. Ian then told them that she'd not. Both Holly and Jessica told Ian to tell Maxine that they were sorry about her not getting the job before leaving and heading toward the library. The search continued throughout the night, but there was no sign of either girl. Over 700 police officers and 500 volunteers gathered the next day on Monday, August 5, 2002, to look for Holly and Jessica. A task force was quickly put together and given the name Operation Fincham. A base for operations was set up on the Soham Village College grounds. There was a palpable fear for the girls. Many people around town knew them and didn't believe that the girls had chosen to run away. Cambridgeshire police released the last photo taken of the girls, in which they were wearing matching Manchester United t-shirts. Their physical descriptions were released to the media. Holly was described as being fair with blonde hair, and Jessica as tanned with shoulder-length brown hair. Both girls were white, slim, and around 4 feet 6 inches in height. Both the Wells and Chapman families spoke at the press conference. They informed the public that Holly and Jessica were both wary of strangers and would not have spoken to any strangers. Police dive teams searched nearby bodies of water, while volunteers took to poking through the overgrown grass with sticks. A helicopter fitted with a thermal imaging camera flew over the entire town. Police even asked for help from the local U.S. Air Force Base, for help in using their aircraft to search for the girls. Many held on to the hope that the girls had just gone off to have some fun and did not return home out of fear. Police then turned to their idol, David Beckham, and asked if he could send out a message of support. In his message, he encouraged both Holly and Jessica to return home to their parents and that they would not be in trouble. By Wednesday, August 7th, 2002, police had conducted 400 door-to-door interviews, stopped over 700 vehicles to search, and received over 2,500 phone calls. There were still no new leads, despite the extensive search. That evening, the community held a candlelight vigil and prayed for the girls' safe return. It was on Thursday, August 8th, 2002, when the police gave another press conference. They were able to get a hold of CCTV footage and played this on a national news platform. They also revealed to the public that there had been an eyewitness named Ian Huntley who claimed to have seen the girls shortly before they disappeared. Reporter Jeremy Thompson was curious and decided to interview Ian about his last meeting with the girls.
They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St. Andrew's, and off the walk in the direction of the library over there.
With a lack of leads, police were left with their last option. They needed to interview Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr. Ian and Maxine had taken a very active role in the investigation by offering to assist wherever possible. Ian helped coordinate many searches throughout the school grounds, and both he and Maxine gave interviews to eager local reporters. By Saturday, August 10th, 2002, police were able to use the CCTV footage showing the girls' movements that Sunday afternoon and reconstruct their movements. The video reconstruction was followed by a plea made by the parents of both Holly and Jessica. It was after this video had been broadcast that phone calls from the public began flooding in. There were over 2,000 phone calls reporting sightings of the girls made by the public. A man named Mark Tuck claimed to have seen the girls walking on Sand Street at 6:30 p.m. on the evening of August 4th, 2002. He alleged that he commented to his wife, "Look, there's two little Beckhams over there." Another woman named Karen Greenwood said she'd seen them walking arm in arm 2 minutes later on College Road. Another woman claimed to have seen both girls walking together the next morning past their house in nearby Little Thetford. Police soon realized that many of these leads were turning out to be false. The investigation team made an appeal for young children to avoid wearing Manchester United t-shirts in public. They believed this was one of the causes for the numerous false leads they were getting. Investigators developed a profile of the abductor. They deduced that he may have been a local man or was familiar with the area. He may have a history of being a sex offender and was aged between 25 and 40 years old. It was a broad description, and police soon discovered there were almost 700 men who fit the profile living in and around Soham alone. The police, together with Holly and Jessica's parents, made another attempt to try and find the girls. This time they turned to the media and spoke directly to the abductor.
Give them back. Just give them back. Just put an end to all of this for them.
By now, the media had taken to scrutinizing the work being done by the investigators. They'd criticized their ability to solve the case despite extensive investigations and media focus on the case. To the public, it seemed as though the investigation had hit a dead end and that there was no suspect in sight. The case, it seemed, was about to go cold, and there was nothing that could be done about it. But there was about to be another twist in this tragic tale. Unbeknownst to the public, investigators had already begun looking into someone they suspected. Behind the scenes, police had already begun working their theory that whomever was responsible was living in Soham.
In the last few minutes, a 28-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman, both from the Soham area.
The person they suspected was Ian Huntley. Investigators took a keen interest in Ian Huntley and his fiancée, Maxine Carr. Initially, it was due to the fact that both girls had stopped by the house to ask about Maxine, and Ian was the last to see them. Another aspect of their suspicions stemmed from the willingness shown by both Ian and Maxine to grant interviews with the media and help in the search for both Holly and Jessica. Over the course of 2 weeks, police regularly visited the caretaker's home under the guise of it just being a friendly inquiry. Police officers noticed several oddities as they searched the house following their disappearance. One of the officers noted numerous items of clothing hanging out on the washing line despite the rainy weather. Another noticed the immaculate condition of the house and a fresh lemony scent permeating the air. Ian then told officers that they were forced to clean the house because of flooding that occurred in the dining room. Officers also noted that Ian sometimes appeared agitated when speaking about the girls. They were suspicious of him from the onset of the investigation. Another problem investigators had in believing Ian's story came quite early into the investigation. In interviews with police and media, Maxine Carr repeated the same version of events as Ian. She remained his alibi throughout the initial investigation, never changing her story as police checked and rechecked with them over the course of 2 weeks. The issue was that a few days after the girls had disappeared, they received tips about Maxine lying about her whereabouts that evening. 2 days after the news had spread nationally, police had received a call from a woman named Marion Clift. She was a neighbor of Maxine's mother and lived in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. Marion alleged to have seen Ian and Maxine standing and looking at something in the car trunk on Tuesday, August 6, 2002. Ian appeared to be pale and shaky, according to Marion, who said he abruptly closed the car trunk when he noticed her. There were also other tips that had started coming in about Maxine. In the days following the news of the disappearance of the girls, several locals claimed to have spotted Maxine in Grimsby that Sunday. They said she appeared to have been intoxicated and hard to miss. The police kept this information private, hoping to catch the suspects in their own trap. Investigators needed to keep all their cards close to their chest. Any hint of suspicion against Ian or Maxine could have compromised their case. As the circumstantial evidence against Ian and Maxine grew, investigators decided to take a closer look at both their prime suspects. An initial look at their backgrounds provided nothing with regard to criminal records until they dug a little deeper and interviewed people close to the couple. Ian Huntley was born on January 31st, 1974. Throughout his school years, Ian was regarded as a loner and an oddball. He was bullied in school and was considered an average learner by his teachers. He often developed friendships with girls a year or so younger than himself. In June 1994, he met Claire Evans. They were married 2 months later in August 1994. Within days of being married, Ian developed a volatile temper, and he soon began to abuse and assault his wife. His marriage fell apart, and as his wife tried to break away from him, he began to emotionally manipulate her by feigning illness. They eventually divorced, and Ian spiraled into a series of crimes against women. 3 of these cases were reported to police, but all 3 girls refused to file criminal charges. In April 1998, he was once again arrested on suspicion of assault against an 18-year-old girl. He claimed that the act was consensual and the charge was dropped. In May 1998, another 18-year-old girl reported that Ian had attacked and assaulted her. He was charged and remanded in jail for a week. After CCTV evidence showed that the two had been socializing in a nightclub with each other, the prosecution dropped the charge based on insufficient evidence to convict him of non-consensual relations. Rumors began to spread, however, and Ian was fired from his job. Another case involving the assault of an 11-year-old girl was reported to police in July 1998, but there was nothing to corroborate the claim, and so the charges were dropped. Maxine Carr was born on February 16, 1977. She was the second of 2 daughters, and her parents were divorced. Her family often found themselves in financial difficulties, but somehow managed to get by. In school, she was considered an outcast and had performed poorly academically, but she always aspired to be a teacher. In her teenage years, she'd become insecure about herself due to weight gain and being unpopular. As she grew older, she developed eating disorders to lose weight and began craving the attention of boys. After finishing school, Maxine worked with her mother at a fish processing factory before attending Grimsby Institute for further and higher education and general care. She'd worked at a care home before returning to the fish processing plant. Colleagues remarked that she often spoke about wanting to become a teacher. In February 1999, Ian met Maxine Carr at a nightclub, and the two developed an instant attraction. Within 4 weeks, Maxine had moved in with Ian. According to family, they were eager to start a family and were engaged by June 1999. In July 1999, though, Ian once again got into trouble when another woman accused him of assault. Maxine provided Ian with an alibi, and Ian provided a DNA sample to investigators. The woman, however, eventually dropped the charges, claiming that Ian had not been the perpetrator. All seemed to be going on well, and to the outside world, Maxine and Ian seemed to be in love and happy. But Ian was possessive, and Maxine seemed to thrive off of this affection. Both Ian and Maxine conducted several affairs while they were together, and on several occasions, Maxine returned to her mother's home. It became a regular occurrence. Ian and Maxine would fight, then she'd leave, and he'd call her until she caved into his demands and returned. By 2001, Ian and Maxine had decided to give their relationship a fresh start and decided to relocate to Soham, Cambridgeshire. Ian got a job as a caretaker at Soham Village College in September 2001. He used the alias Ian Nixon and was able to get away without the school board discovering his colorful past. He was also able to secure residency at the caretaker's cottage next door to the school. In February 2002, Ian was able to find Maxine a part-time volunteer position at St. Andrew's Primary School as a teacher's assistant. It was a volunteer position, and Maxine had lied about her qualifications. She, however, got the post and became the teaching assistant to Holly and Jessica's teacher. When she applied for a full-time position at the school in July 2002, she was subsequently turned down. Investigators were now aware of the turbulent relationship between Ian and Maxine, as well as their troubled pasts. To police, the couple showed tendencies towards recklessness when faced with major dilemmas in their lives. Ian's past sexual offenses and his harassment of younger girls did not help his case. Added to that was Maxine's ability to overlook many of Ian's indiscretions and provide alibis when he needed it the most. Everything the police had, though, was circumstantial at best. There was no physical evidence linking Ian and Maxine to the girls' murders, only theories. The closest clue that they discovered had been the cell phone records of Jessica's phone. Its last known location had been somewhere near Ian and Maxine's residence. This was not enough, as it could have been proven that the girls were abducted after speaking to Ian, which he freely admitted. Police took to using other methods to create an air of suspicion within the community. They organized a town meeting at the college hall on August 15, 2002, and invited all residents. It was designed to rattle Ian. At the meeting, they provided all the details they had so far. This included the profile of the suspected abductor and the possibility that he may be hidden within their community. They asked all those who attended if they'd noticed anyone doing anything out of the ordinary that Sunday afternoon. They encouraged everyone to take a closer look at their neighbors and scrutinize anything and everything their neighbors did. Investigators hoped this plan would work. On Monday, August 16, 2002, investigators once again paid Ian and Maxine a visit. They had enough circumstantial evidence, but it still wasn't enough to prove their guilt. Instead, they wanted to question them again and present their new findings, hoping it would break one of them into confessing their involvement with the girls' disappearance. The couple had not been placed under arrest by police, although they had their suspicions. They were interviewed separately in two separate locations outside of Soham for 7 hours. Maxine was asked about the many tips they received that she'd been seen in Grimsby on the night of August 4, 2002. She denied these allegations and stuck to her original story. Ian, too, was questioned and stuck to his story by dodging leading questions and maintaining he only tried to help find the girl. At the station, they had asked Ian to provide his fingerprints and DNA samples as part of the investigation routine. Afterwards, Ian and Maxine were released at around 9:30 p.m. that evening. Police set them up at a local motel, telling them they needed to conduct a thorough search of the house as it was standard procedure. The room had been bugged, but the couple said nothing that could incriminate them. In the meantime, investigators swept through Ian's home on 5 college clothes. The house had been remarkably clean. Police looked through several drawers and discovered Ian's set of keys for the grounds of the schoolyard. They turned their attention to searching the grounds of the school and were able to open a locker to which Ian previously stated he did not have the keys. What investigators were about to discover was undoubtedly going to seal the fate of their suspect. Inside, they discovered a bin bag, and within it, the charred remains of 2 Manchester United t-shirts. There is no doubt the girls had met a fatal and tragic end. On August 17, 2002, at 4:30 a.m., both Ian and Maxine were arrested for the abduction and murder of both Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
In the last few hours, a 28-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman have been arrested.
Ian refused to answer questions and feigned mental illness to avoid further interrogation. He was sent to a mental hospital to undergo psychological investigation. Maxine, on the other hand, confessed that she'd been lying about her whereabouts on August 4, 2002. She went on to tell investigators that Ian was worried after he heard the girls had disappeared and thought he'd be blamed. She alleged that Ian called her after the girls had disappeared, fearing he would be blamed. Ian allegedly told Maxine that both girls had been inside the house and touched things before leaving. When he heard they'd disappeared, he believed police would come after him because of his past offenses. Maxine said she'd agreed to cover up to help save Ian from persecution. Police did not reveal to Maxine the evidence they discovered, hoping she would tell them the truth on her own. At 12:30 p.m. on August 17, 2002, 48-year-old gamekeeper Keith Pryor discovered the bodies of two little girls lying side by side. They were found in a 5-foot-deep irrigation ditch near the perimeter fence of the RAF Lakenheath base in Suffolk. Pryor and his friend Adrian Lawrence immediately called police to report the discovery. When police arrived, they knew they'd found the remains of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
We are certain, as we possibly can be tonight, the two bodies, that they are those of Holly and Jessica.
They'd been badly burned and disfigured. The bodies were discovered 10 miles away from their home in Soham. The bodies of both girls were taken to the coroner's office for autopsy. Examiners hypothesized that the probable cause of death was asphyxiation. The bodies had been dumped in an attempt to cover up the crime, but tissue samples provided an estimated time of death to be around 2 weeks. DNA had to be extracted from both bodies to determine and confirm their identities due to the damage caused by the burning. It was also determined by both the investigators and the coroner that the girls had been killed elsewhere and thereafter placed in the ditch. This was due to the lack of burn marks at the crime scene and the debris found on the girls' bodies at the autopsy. Services were held for the girls throughout the nation as a show of support for the family in their time of mourning. Holly Wells was laid to rest on September 3, 2002, and Jessica Chapman was cremated on September 4, 2002. Having discovered the bodies, investigators now began working with the physical evidence they'd found. Testing of the bin bag showed that Ian's fingerprints were left all over the bag. Fibers and DNA were recovered from the items discovered, and police were able to positively match these to Ian Huntley's clothing and carpeting from his house. Ian's car was also searched, and investigators noted that the interior had been well cleaned. A cover from the rear seat had been missing, and the lining of the car trunk had been replaced with an ill-fitted carpet piece. Despite the cleaning, traces of mud, brick dust, chalk, and concrete were found on the pedals and wheel arches of the car. These matched the same type of concrete used to pave the road leading up to where the girls were found. Investigators had their physical evidence. It was now time to recreate the events of the evening. Investigators believe that after Holly and Jessica left the Wells residence, they made their way to the sports center. They had spent some time inside the area before setting off on their way back home to Holly's house. This can be confirmed by the CCTV footage that was discovered after they went missing. Afterwards, they stopped at the home of Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr. Both girls, according to reports, inquired after Maxine and her job application. From here, investigators believe that Ian lured them into the house with ulterior motives, perhaps assault. When the girls tried to escape, Ian attacked and incapacitated both girls, then proceeded to strangle them in a fit of rage as he was prone to. Afterwards, he tried to contact Maxine, and when she failed to answer, he decided to get rid of the girls' bodies. He removed their clothes because it would make it easier to identify them. It's then assumed that before the search could begin, Ian took the girls' bodies to a remote location to burn them before transporting the bodies to the irrigation ditch near Lakenheath, as he knew the area well from the time he began his hobby of plane spotting. When he returned home, he tried to burn the clothes, but the smoke may have been too visible, so he put out the fire and stuffed everything into a bin bag and locked it in the school storage hangar. He then scrubbed the house down, trying to remove all evidence before having a bath himself. Afterwards, he joined in the search to throw off suspicion. For the next 2 weeks, Ian and his fiancée Maxine continued to put up the pretense that they'd only tried to help. The trial began on November 5, 2003 at the Old Bailey. Ian was being charged with 2 counts of murder. Maxine was being charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender and 1 count of perverting the course of justice. The jury were presented with the evidence and the circumstantial findings that led to Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr's arrest. His criminal past was also brought forward and painted the picture of a man who had a motive to lure the 2 girls into his house. They also heard from Ian, who defended himself, declaring that both girls had died accidentally. He alleged that he tried to help Holly stop her nosebleed and accidentally knocked her into the bathtub. She drowned after being knocked unconscious. Jessica, he said, had started screaming and in his panicked state tried to stop her from screaming and accidentally suffocated her. When asked why he didn't call emergency services, he said that he wondered if police would believe him and opted to cover up their deaths. Maxine testified that she tried to help Ian because he was being wrongfully accused of a crime he did not commit. She cited his past offenses as the reason for the cover-up. Maxine then said she would not have stood by Ian if she believed it was possible for him to have murdered the girls. The trial lasted almost 6 weeks, and on December 17, 2003, Ian Huntley was charged with the murders and given 2 life sentences. He'll have to remain in prison for a minimum of 40 years before being considered for parole. Maxine Carr was sentenced to 3 years in prison for her role in the murders. She was released on probation after serving 24 months in prison on May 14, 2004. She's since changed her identity to safeguard herself from vigilante attacks by civilians. On April 3, 2003, the house on 5 College Close was officially demolished. For the families of Holly and Jessica, their memories still live on. There's still the feeling of emptiness as loved ones wonder what could have been for both girls. For them, 2 bright lights were extinguished by a monster who should have been locked away years before he set foot in Soham. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on today's case. Do you believe that Ian Huntley accidentally killed both girls? Do you think Maxine Carr is as innocent and ignorant as she claims? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more intriguing true crime content. Until next time, stay safe.